Welcome to St. Hosea Hermitage. This is your Kuya Mel, and I am here to continue facilitating you to a recollection to the orphan within, which each of us have. The orphan within is an archetype in our collective unconscious that aims to help us understand, be conscious, and cope whenever that moment of being orphaned comes to us. Last time, we did an activity to reflect your own experience of abandonment and resilience. Having this in mind, we will start our session today by reflecting on the word orphan. What three words comes to your mind with the word orphan? For example, I chose betrayal, rejection, neglected. Our objective is to make each of us aware of the qualities of this orphan as far as we know. So write down in the comment whatever is in your mind, just at least three words. The orphan within is triggered when we feel abandoned, betrayed, rejected, or victimized by life's circumstances. The most common trigger is the unfaithfulness of a spouse or a partner. One feels betrayed when the spouse hid an affair. At the onset of the discovery, the betrayed undergoes a cycle of shock, denial, and paranoia before caving in to grief, anger, and depression. You just couldn't believe of what you have heard or what you have seen when someone told you that your partner is having an affair, or when you found out in his email or text that he was flirting with another. Are you sure it was him? Am I just suspicious? I could be wrong, but you feel that deep inside it could be. So you investigate, you look into the social media, you stalk on him, you spied on him, or maybe you confronted him. He lied and gaslighted you, telling you that you are just insecure or out of your mind. You feel guilty that he was right. So you could be wrong. Your intuition could be wrong, but still you kept following him, spied on him, until you find out the truth. Then overwhelming sadness engulfs you, feeling alone, abandoned, and betrayed. You constantly ruminating, repetitive thinking, and dwelling on negative emotions, overthinking on the causes and consequences of what happened to you. You feel intense anger and rage. In fighting mode, you are not ready to let go, and you could have confronted him and his paramour. You got tired, confused, and fall to depression, swallowed in deep sadness. The brain is still in a fight mode, but the desire to relieve the pain drives you to flee. You feel numb, it was too much to take in. You detach from others, you just want to be alone. Cortisol is high, it's the hormones that fight stress, and the body is fighting to survive. And the mind couldn't get off the depression. You could get sick. Some just lost their appetite, some engage in binge eating, and some sometimes oversleep, or sometimes they had insomnia. And oftentimes, like myself, I get over fatigue, I get so tired. And then self doubt permeates my mind. And I was thinking, what have I done wrong? Why I didn't I see this coming? Then I remember I lost trust. I lost that sense of trust on everything, on everyone. I began to doubt my abilities because why have I trusted my decisions? I made myself believe that what I did was wrong, and it was myself who caused my own suffering. So there is that deep seated guilt. And the orphan within is also triggered in abusive relationships, especially those who grew up from verbal, physical, and emotional abuse during their childhood. They may have experienced silent treatment, neglect, or they have been raised in a home exposed to domestic violence, indifference, the screaming and the humiliating, the use of expletive language. They grew up in fear, in low self-esteem, feeling unwanted, unloved, and rejected. It triggered shame. It questions their worth. Am I not lovable? Am I not valuable? Because if I was, they wouldn't have done this to me. Or some people may think they did something wrong and grew up justifying what their abusers did. The mind could suppress these painful childhood experiences and relegated it to the unconscious. But even if it's in the unconscious, that orphan within will try to rise and express itself. Then, when similar things happen, the orphan within is triggered. Children left by parents who need to work abroad also experience feelings of abandonment, and sometimes they could blame themselves for the sacrifices they and their parents have to endure. The pains of separation emerges in childhood whenever the orphan within is triggered. The orphan within is triggered when we feel rejected. When the pain of rejection is wrenching, one could feel time slowing down. You feel numb, feeling detached from others, feeling detached from reality, not connected to the present. Psychologists calls this dissociation, and usually this happens to people who experience trauma. It's like the mind wants to separate itself from the body. It's a flight response in our brain in an attempt to dissociate from the pain. This could happen too when we experience separation. I remember myself just staring blank, looking afar. It's a blank stare. It's like the world stopped revolving. That's I remember that when my grandpa passed away, or when my dad picked me up from the seminary when they kicked me out because of my piety, when also I caught my ex having an affair. I was tired, overthinking, questioning, and self-blaming, and I just wanted to be numb. And when senses came back to me, I cried. The orphan within is triggered by a death in the family, a rejection, or betrayal. When the pain is unbearable, we can do our best to be relieved of that pain. Sometimes we need to be in isolation, to reflect in a quiet place. Prayers, meditations, listening to music helps to quiet the mind and relieve the pain, even just for a moment. Our survival instinct helps us survive all the sufferings of the child within, using all the defense mechanisms ingrained in it. The resilience shows the inclination towards becoming whole and integrated individual. Our nature, even without intervention from therapists or even without mindful effort to look into the shadow, will force ourselves to this path of individuation. There are many paths, though without being aware of our shadow, the path could be dire and dark. This dark path could lead the individual to implode and driven towards isolation and withdrawal from the world, distrust of the world, or fear of the dangers in which he was previously exposed to, characterized with helplessness, defeatist attitude, and cynicism. Without being aware of the shadow, the individual could develop cognitive or emotional or even personality disorder. During the early onset of being depressed due to betrayal, the individual may find difficulties regulating his emotions, characterized with mood swings, increased worrying and anxiety, panic attacks, and lack of motivation or loss of meaning to live. If persisted for a long time, one developed traits that could progress into a personality style or disorder. If it was too much to deal with for a child, to avoid horrible emotions, the brain becomes emotionally blind. Example of this is when one is so anxious, he can't distinguish hunger from fear. Now, another example of emotional blindness, the child's brain get whacked out by constantly avoiding painful emotions up to the point that he feels numb and detached. Sometimes leading to an absence of ability to empathize, which characterize those developing into narcissistic tendency. The orphan within would seek to avoid shame, brought up constantly being shamed, criticized, controlled, manipulated, neglected, and abused, which has caused deep emotional trauma. The need for constant praise and admiration arises to repair a damaged self worth because early in childhood, their caregiver put them down. They were made to feel that they are not good enough, creating need for validation, and they could get it only when they satisfy their caregiver. It's an emotional manipulation. And so when the child grew up, he becomes like his abusive caregiver. He becomes manipulator too. Narcissists frequently demeans, intimidates, and bullies another to show their strength and superiority, a way to boost their self-worth at the expense of others. It's because deep inside they are wounded. Deep inside they are wounded. They are weak. They have low self-esteem. It's like a bandage to cover the wounds of shame by bringing shame to others. To rise up by putting down others, they project a mask, a persona congruent to what they seek, the need for validation. And without being aware, this is relegated to the shadow, constantly emerging and revealing its destructiveness by constantly lying and manipulating, putting other people's down, and they try to get the supply they need in order to repair that damaged self-worth. The lack of empathy, their inability to understand people's emotion were supplanted by their preoccupation to build a grandiose sense of esteem. Betrayal trauma happening in a series of protracted events could also lead to a borderline personality. The orphan within is triggered when there is a threat in relationship, whenever one fears abandonment. Abandonment and betrayal are the most worrisome manifestation of the shadow of an orphan if left unchecked. If one could integrate this shadow, he could emerge a resilient, authentic empath, able to accept his strength and weaknesses, developing self confidence and the ability to form authentic bonds. Otherwise, one continues to struggle in his inner chaos, his betrayal traumas, and possibly develop an acute fear of abandonment that even affects his temper, usually manifested among those with borderline personality, characterized with mood swings, difficulties controlling their anger, rage, impulsiveness, and pervasive sense of emptiness. And sometimes they could easily forget what happened. One time they are in rage, they inflict violence or physical abuse to other people, and then suddenly when the rage is gone and they cannot remember what happened. It's like they were completely there was a shutdown of their brain. They didn't know that they did that. Becoming aware of the wounds of the orphan could be difficult to deal with. It is important that it is allowed to express its emotions. Dr. Ramani suggested one who suffers trauma to find a place to vent and to talk about it again and again to get off the pain. And sometimes help may be needed, especially those that has manifested in forms characterized in personality disorders like narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder. It may take some time for the wounds to heal, to be able to embrace and accept the shadow of the orphan and find the balance between letting go and taking responsibility for your actions. So now your assignment is to write down what you remember in childhood. When you experience separation from your dad or your mom, and take note of the feelings associated with this. Write down how you feel about it. And so next meeting I will share with you my own experience of this separation or this a feeling of abandonment in my childhood with my dad. Just watch out for that. See you next time.